They say that when you lose one sense, the others sharpen. Lying there in the pitch black of my bedroom, unable to see anything but the terrified tears clouding my vision, my hearing was agonizingly clear. I heard the rain pounding against the Chicago pavement outside. I heard the blood rushing in my ears. But mostly, I heard the sound that would haunt me for the rest of my life. Click. The slow, metallic sound of my bedroom doorknob turning. I held my breath, my eyes glued to the shadow of the handle. It twisted all the way to the right, then all the way to the left. Someone was testing the lock. Someone was trying to get in. And here is the part that made my blood run cold. I knew, with absolute certainty, that my roommate, Chloe, wasn't home. I had heard her storm out an hour ago. I heard her car screech away. I was supposed to be alone in the apartment. So, who was standing on the other side of that thin layer of wood? And more importantly, why did I hear the front door unlock with a key just moments before? My name is Lisa, and I learned the hard way that the monsters you should fear aren't the ones hiding under your bed. They are the ones who smile at you, call you their best friend, and then hand the spare key to your executioner. Let's rewind to where this actually began. Because to understand the terror of that night, you have to understand the trust that came before it. You have to understand that I didn't just let a stranger into my life, I thought I was making a best friend. 6 months ago, I was 22, fresh out of college, and moving to Chicago for a junior graphic design job. I was exactly the kind of person predators love, young, eager to please, and completely alone in a massive city. My student loans were suffocating me, and every apartment listing I found was either a rat-infested closet or way out of my price range. Then, I found the ad on Craigslist. A spacious room in a vintage 2-bedroom apartment in Wicker Park. The rent was $600. It was impossibly cheap, the kind of deal you assume is a scam. But I was desperate, so I messaged the number. That's how I met Chloe. If you met Chloe, you would have liked her immediately. Everyone did. She was 26, worked in PR, and had this effortless, chaotic energy that drew people in like moths to a flame. When I showed up for the viewing, she didn't ask for a credit check. She didn't ask for references or a background check. She just cracked open a bottle of cheap Pinot Grigio, poured me a glass, and we sat on the floor of the empty living room talking for 2 hours. She told me she just needed someone cool and low maintenance. She said her last roommate was a nightmare who counted every penny, and she just wanted a vibe that felt like family. By the time I left, I hadn't just signed a lease. I felt like I had found a big sister. The first 2 months were what I call the honeymoon phase. It was genuinely perfect. We synced up instantly. We'd order Thai food on Tuesday nights and binge-watch reality TV until 2 a.m. She helped me pick out outfits for dates. I helped her edit her resume. We shared secrets. I told her about my anxiety. She told me about her family drama. I remember calling my mom about 3 weeks in and saying, "Mom, I got so lucky. Chloe is amazing." I felt safe. For the first time in this big, scary city, I felt like I had a home. In hindsight, the red flags were there, but they were painted over with charisma. I ignored the fact that she always paid her half of the rent in crumpled cash. I ignored the way she would sometimes disappear for 2 days and come back looking exhausted and jittery, claiming she was working late. I was looking at the world through rose-colored glasses, so happy to have a friend that I completely missed the fact that I was walking into a trap. I thought we were building a home together. I didn't realize I was just a temporary solution to her problems, a placeholder until she needed to cash out. The change didn't happen overnight. It wasn't like a switch flipped and suddenly I was living in a horror movie. It was a slow, agonizing erosion of my boundaries, the kind that happens so gradually you don't realize you're drowning until the water is already filling your lungs. It started about 3 months in. The cozy movie nights were replaced by what I can only describe as a parade of strangers. At first, it was just the weekends. Chloe would bring guys back from the bars, loud, drunk, frat boy types. Annoying, sure, but not threatening. I'd just roll my eyes, put on my noise-canceling headphones, and lock my bedroom door. I told myself this was just part of city living. I told myself I needed to be more tolerant. But then, the schedule shifted. Friday nights turned into Tuesday nights, then Thursdays, and eventually, it felt like there was a stranger in our apartment almost every single night. And the quality of these guests shifted too. These weren't guys she met on Hinge. They weren't guys she was dating. They were different, harder. The laughter and music stopped. Instead, I'd wake up at 3 a.m. to the sound of hushed, intense conversations in the living room. I'd walk into the kitchen in the morning to find muddy boot prints on the floor and the heavy, lingering stench of cheap cigarettes and something chemical that made my nose burn. I remember the first time I felt a true spike of fear. It was a Wednesday. I came home from work early, exhausted, just wanting to crash. I unlocked the front door and froze. There was a man sitting on our couch. He wasn't watching TV. He wasn't on his phone. He was just sitting there, staring at the blank wall, wearing a dirty Carhartt jacket that looked 2 sizes too big. He didn't even flinch when I walked in. He just slowly turned his head and looked at me with eyes that were glassy and completely devoid of warmth. I mumbled a quick hello and practically ran to my room, locking the door behind me. My heart was hammering against my ribs. When Chloe finally came home hours later, I confronted her. I was shaking partly from anger, partly from nerves. I hate confrontation. "Chloe," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Who was that guy?" I walked in and he was just sitting there. I didn't know him. I don't feel safe having random men here when you aren't even home. I expected an apology. I expected her to say, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry, I totally forgot he was there." Instead, she laughed. A cold, dismissive laugh that made me feel about 2 inches tall. "God, Lisa, relax," she said, grabbing a beer from the fridge and not even looking me in the eye. "That was just Mike. He's a friend. He needed a place to crash for a few hours. You're acting like such a suburban soccer mom. It's my apartment too, you know. I'm allowed to have friends over." That right there? That was the trap. She made me feel like I was the problem. She made me feel like I was being uptight and unreasonable. It was textbook manipulation. She used my desire to be a cool roommate against me. So, I backed down. I apologized. I swallowed my fear because I didn't want to ruin the friendship. But the atmosphere in the apartment had curdled. It became hostile. I started spending as much time as possible out of the house, staying late at the office, lingering in coffee shops until they closed, reading books in the park until it got too dark to see. I was paying rent for a home I was terrified to enter. The breaking point for my intuition, the moment my survival instinct finally screamed louder than my politeness, happened about 2 weeks ago. I woke up in the middle of the night, parched. The apartment was silent. I assumed everyone was asleep or gone. I crept out to the kitchen to get a glass of water. The only light came from the street lamps outside, filtering through the blinds. As I was filling my glass, I felt eyes on me. You know that primal feeling? The hairs on the back of my neck stood straight up. I turned around slowly. Standing in the hallway, in the shadows between the bathroom and the living room, was a man. Not Mike. Not anyone I had seen before. He was leaning against the wall, arms crossed, just watching me. He was completely silent. He didn't say, "Sorry to startle you." He didn't introduce himself. He just smiled, a slow, predatory grin that didn't reach his eyes. I didn't drink the water. I didn't say a word. I turned around, walked back into my room, and shut the door. My hands were trembling so badly I couldn't even turn the little thumb lock on the handle at first. I dragged my desk chair over and wedged it under the doorknob. I sat on my bed, knees pulled to my chest, listening, waiting for footsteps. The next morning, while Chloe was in the shower, I left the house and went straight to the hardware store. I bought a heavy-duty, single-cylinder deadbolt. The kind you need a key to open. Installing it felt like a betrayal. I waited until Chloe went out for her shift, and I drilled into the doorframe with shaking hands. I felt guilty. I felt rude. I kept thinking, what if she sees this and gets mad? What if she thinks I don't trust her? But as I drove that final screw into the strike plate, a wave of relief washed over me. When Chloe saw it a few days later, she sneered. "Wow, really? A deadbolt? Do you have the crown jewels in there or something? You're so weird, Lisa." I just shrugged and made a joke about being a light sleeper. I didn't tell her the truth, that I was terrified of her friends, that I was terrified of her. I thought the lock was just for peace of mind. I thought it was just so I could sleep at night without wedging a chair under the door. I had no idea that within 72 hours, that piece of metal would be the only thing standing between me and a violent end. That brings us to last Tuesday, the night the timer finally hit zero. It was raining a heavy, relentless downpour that battered the windows. I was in my room, trying to study for finals with my noise-canceling headphones on, but even the technology couldn't block out the sound of the front door slamming open around 11:30 p.m. I pulled my headphones off. Chloe was back. And she wasn't alone. But this time, it wasn't the usual giggly, drunk chatter of a late-night hookup. It was shouting, angry, desperate shouting. I crept to my door and cracked it open just a sliver, maybe an inch, to see if I needed to call the cops. Chloe was standing in the narrow hallway, soaking wet, screaming at a man. And this guy, he was terrifying. He was huge, easily 6'4", wearing a dirty flannel jacket that smelled like stale beer and wet dog. He wasn't yelling back, which was almost scarier. He was just standing there, swaying slightly, his fists clenched at his sides. "I don't have it!" Chloe screamed, her voice cracking. "I told you, I need more time, just leave." The man took a step toward her. His voice was a low, gravelly rumble that vibrated through the floorboards. "I'm done waiting, Chloe. You pay up, or we have a problem." Chloe backed up against the wall. Her eyes darted around the apartment frantically. Then, for a split second, her gaze landed on my bedroom door. Through the crack, our eyes met. I expected her to mouth, "Help me," or "Call the police." But she didn't. Her expression shifted. It went from terrified to cold. Calculation. She looked at me, then she looked back at the man, and a strange resolve washed over her face. "Fine," she spat. "You want collateral? Take what you can find. I'm leaving." She grabbed her keys off the entry table and bolted out the front door. "Chloe," the man roared, but she was already gone. I heard the heavy oak door slam shut. I heard her feet pounding down the stairs. Then, through the window, I heard her car engine roar to life, tires screeching against the wet pavement as she sped away into the night. Then, silence. Dead, heavy silence. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. My heart was racing, but a wave of relief washed over me. Thank God, I thought. They're gone. She left, and he chased after her. I was about to close my door and go back to bed when I realized something that made my stomach drop into my shoes. I heard the car drive away. I heard the front door slam once, but I never heard it open a second time. I froze, my hand still gripping the doorknob. I strained my ears against the silence of the apartment, praying I was wrong, praying that the sound of the rain had just covered up his exit. Creak. It came from the living room. It was a specific floorboard, the loose one right in front of the hallway entrance, the one that only makes noise when you put weight on it. He hadn't followed her. He hadn't left. He was standing in our living room, alone, in the dark, and he knew I was in there. My heart didn't just race. It hammered against my ribs so hard I thought it would crack them. I was paralyzed, standing in the middle of my dark bedroom, staring at the door. Thump, thump, thump. Heavy, deliberate footsteps started coming down the hallway. He wasn't sneaking around anymore. He wasn't trying to be quiet. He was walking with the heavy, arrogant stride of a man who knows he owns the place. I snapped out of my trance. I lunged forward, my fingers fumbling in the dark, and threw the deadbolt on my door. The metal slide clicked into place with a sound that seemed deafening in the quiet apartment. I backed away, grabbing my phone off the nightstand, my hands shaking so violently I almost dropped it. The footsteps stopped right outside my door. For a terrifying 10 seconds, there was nothing. No sound. Just the wheezing, wet sound of his breathing on the other side of the wood. I could smell him, that acrid mix of stale tobacco and rain seeping through the cracks. Then, the doorknob turned. It moved slowly at first. A test. Then, finding resistance, it jerked violently back and forth. The metal rattled in its socket. Rattle, rattle, rattle. "Lisa." His voice was a low, slurring growl. Hearing my own name coming from the mouth of this monster was the most violation I have ever felt. "Your friend said you were nice," he taunted. "Open the door, Lisa. I just want to talk." I didn't answer. I couldn't. My throat had closed up completely. I retreated into the far corner of the room, squeezing myself into the tiny space of my closet, burying myself under a pile of dirty laundry. I dialed 911, pressing the phone so hard against my ear it hurt. 911. What is your? He's in the house, I whispered, tears streaming down my face. He's breaking into my room. Please hurry. Bam! The entire apartment shook. He had thrown his shoulder against the door. Dust drifted down from the ceiling frame. Bam! Open it! He roared. The pretense of politeness was gone. He was an animal now, enraged and hungry. I watched through the slats of the closet door as the wood around my deadbolt, that cheap $15 piece of metal I had installed out of paranoia, began to splinter. The frame was cracking. One more hit, maybe two, and he would be inside. Crack. With a sound like a gunshot, the door jamb finally gave way. My bedroom door swung open, hitting the wall with a violence that knocked a picture frame to the floor. And there he was. Framed by the hallway light, he looked massive. He stood in the doorway of my sanctuary, chest heaving, his wet boots dripping onto my carpet. He stepped into the room. He didn't see me in the closet yet. He stood there, scanning the darkness, his head twitching from side to side. "Where are you, little girl?" he hissed. He took another step, then another. He was moving toward the bed. He reached down and ripped the duvet off, expecting to find me cowering underneath. When he saw the empty mattress, he growled in frustration and kicked the bed frame. Then, he turned. He turned slowly, and his eyes landed on the closet door. I stopped breathing. I squeezed my eyes shut, clutching the phone, waiting for the handle to turn, waiting for the end. Just as his dirty fingernails grazed the handle of the closet door, the room suddenly exploded with light. A kaleidoscope of blue and red flashed frantically against the walls, cutting through the darkness. Then came the sound, the most beautiful sound I have ever heard in my life. The piercing, wailing scream of sirens. Not miles away, but right outside our window. The man froze. His hand hovered in the air for a split second. He muttered a curse word, low and violent, and then he spun around. I heard him sprint back down the hallway. I heard the kitchen window slide open, followed by the clatter of heavy boots hitting the metal fire escape outside. He ran. He knew it was over. I didn't move. I stayed curled in that ball of laundry, shaking uncontrollably, until I heard new voices. Authoritative voices. "Police. Is anyone inside?" It took me 3 tries to find my voice. "I'm in here," I croaked. "I'm in the closet." When the officers finally coaxed me out, the apartment looked like a war zone. My bedroom door was hanging off its hinges, split right down the middle. The living room was trashed. They didn't catch the guy that night. He melted into the city shadows like he was never there. But they found something else. Something that hurt worse than any physical blow he could have dealt me. On the kitchen counter, sitting right next to the fruit bowl, was a sticky note, and weighing it down was a silver key. It was our spare key, the one Chloe kept on her keychain. An officer picked up the note with a gloved hand and read it. He looked at me with genuine pity in his eyes before handing it over. I recognized Chloe's loopy, bubbly handwriting immediately. It read, "Here's the key. Take whatever you want to settle the debt. I'm gone." I stared at that piece of paper until the words blurred together. The realization hit me like a physical punch to the gut. Chloe hadn't fled in a panic. She hadn't forgotten to lock the door. This was a transaction. She owed that man money for drugs, for gambling. I don't know, and I never will. But when he came to collect, she didn't have the cash. So she offered him a trade. She gave him the key to our home. She told him I was there alone. She gave him permission to come in and take whatever he wanted as payment. She didn't just abandon me. She sold me. Thanks for listening. If this story gave you chills, please hit that like button, it really helps the channel. And if you have a roommate horror story of your own, share it in the comments below. Stay safe out there.